Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the ISM New Jersey webinar series. Today's topic will be on circular supply chains. This is a topic that has been trending for this year, 2020, and also for next year, 2021. And I'm really excited to hear more about how sustainability is utilized in this process. Please be sure to use the Q&A or the chat tabs for any questions you may have for our speaker. I'm pleased to bring back Jane Tierney again to speak on this topic. Jane founded Purple Link in 2015, recognizing that there is a better way to obtain value and achieve results. Clients discover innovative ways to identify waste and risk leaking dollars from the supply chain, draining the bottom line. By collaborating with stakeholders and suppliers using Purple Link skills, tools, and processes, clients reduce cost and risk while sustaining successes over year. Jane is a Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, has earned her MBA, her CPSM and CPSD certifications, and is also an ISM certified CPSM and CPSD instructor. At this time, I'd like to bring Jane to talk about circular supply chains.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm very happy to be here with ISM New Jersey and your outreach. You have a great audience that you always have, and you have a great way to get to many different people all over the country. So I appreciate the opportunity. It's a crazy time this year, and I thought it was going to get better, but it seems to get crazier this week, but we're just going to all have to ride all of this out. So it's a good chance to talk about something that for me is a little bit of a new topic for supply chain, but I think one that we're going to hear more about. So probably many of you visit yard sales or estate sales, maybe shop in thrift stores for that unique thing that you can't get in today's department stores. And even though we can't do much online, except online shopping right now. So maybe before the pandemic hit you, that was a tradition for you. And many of us like that thrill of finding a treasure, something that's buried away, something that becomes really special for us that someone is offering to, has either gotten rid of through a thrift sale or a thrift store, or is offering in a yard sale or estate sale. A lot of times this is a great thing to do weekend mornings. It's a great way to furnish a home. It's a great way to save money on baby items and maybe kids' clothes, toys, ski kind of equipment, to decorate with a distinctive flair, or maybe find that unique gift for that person that you care about. So this is pretty much the idea behind the circular supply chains, is taking things from one that used to be trash or waste and making that a treasure for something else. So I have three questions for you this morning. The first one is, are you familiar with circular supply chains, and are you really up on what's going on with circular supply chains? These are all kind of yes or no questions. Second question is, do you know what a circular supply chain's biggest contribution is to a company? And the third one is, do you know how to move toward a circular supply chain in your company? So I'm guessing that most of you have one no in this series of questions. And if so, that's a good thing. Then you're in the right place, because that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about what these are. We're going to show you some of the contributions to companies, and we're going to show you how you can move in that direction. So we're going to do just that. We're going to talk about how circular supply chains differ from linear supply chains, more traditional ones. We're going to look at why this matters now and in the future. I'm going to talk about some barriers, some enablers, and some benefits of circular supply chains. And I'm going to give you 4 steps to transform to a circular supply chain within your company. And then I'm going to give away some prizes. So we have a lot to cover today, and I really want to stay connected, and I want to give away some prizes. So right now, if you want to be in the raffle, you need to send me an email with the subject of webinar. Just put webinar in the subject line. You don't have to put anything else. Send it to Jane at purplelink, all one word, .co. There's no M there. So you have to stick around to the end to win, and you need to send me that email. So Jane at purplelink.co with the subject line webinar. And if you're not quite ready, that's okay, because I'm going to give you another chance to enter the raffle before I make the drawing. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, a little more than Kathy offered you. So the reason people are talking about supply chains today is the climate and the environment we've experienced in 2020. We've all seen how 2020 has increased awareness to very naive people about how important supply chains are to the success of a company, and they recognize how broadly they can contribute to the bottom line, which is a great thing for supply chain professionals. So my background started in industrial engineering. And the first part of my career, that's what I did. I like factories. I still like factories. I'm a bit of a factory geek. And I worked for an aerospace company for almost 10 years. And at that time, they announced they were going to shut that plant down. So some of you have experienced that. It's not a fun thing to go through. But myself and almost 10,000 other people suddenly found ourselves out of a job. But as luck or fate, I look at it now, would have it, I was just finishing up my MBA within a couple months of the plant shutdown. So I was open to something different, and I looked around and I found something very different. The best job offer I had was from Hewlett Packard, a really great company. But I was an engineering manager at that time, and this job offer was in procurement. So I knew next to nothing about procurement because I worked in a pretty vertically integrated company, aerospace, but they needed somebody with manufacturing experience, which I had lots of, and they needed people who could lead projects. And I was really good at that too. So, although it took me a year to admit that I worked in procurement, I eventually embraced it and found that I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the travel, the opportunity to work with incredible people all around the globe. I learned a lot about different manufacturing processes. I was able to work out a lot of things for my company using some tools and techniques that I'd learned as an engineer, but I also gained a lot of all of those as well. So I wanted to do a good job and help my company. And so I looked at what I could do. And I found that the procurement area, supply chain, really is my passion. I founded my company to help clients prosper and to really be able to include their suppliers as well as their customers into finding the better way to do something. So, circular supply chains now are the wave of the future, and I'm happy to share my growing understanding of this exciting topic with you today. So, Gartner and Accenture, two well known companies that probably you see some white papers on and some articles on, they did surveys early this year. So, in the probably February timeframe, that indicated that up to 90% of companies, and these were primarily large companies, had plans to implement circular business models and circular supply chains in their organization. So, as many as 90% in these surveys. Many companies, as you all well know, have had their 2020 plans go a little bit sideways and get derailed by this pandemic. But I expect them to return to these kinds of initiatives as soon as we get the dust settled on the pandemic after the election and looking into 2021, because circular supply chains are a really good thing to have. Linear supply chains are ones that we're most familiar with, and they're usually drawn in a straight line where you start with the sub-tier suppliers, you go to the suppliers, and then the transformation area, the manufacturer, and then from the manufacturer, goods go out to retailers, distributors, warehousers, and then finally to the ultimate customer. And then if you're environmentally conscious, you see that after the end user customer, there's the disposal piece of that. And that can involve a lot of different activities to dispose of that product when its life is up. So then we are looking at reclaiming, we're looking at recycling, we're looking at a lot of different things. So those are, when you draw that, it's usually a straight line. And we have all of those things. And then there's also a lot of leftover material from not only the good at the end of its life, but the material from production. There's the packaging along the way. There's all of these things. And a lot of that is often discarded. In a circular supply chain, raw materials are recycled and reused back into manufacturing operations. They're reused, repurposed, or they become inputs to another product or process. Very little, or if possible, absolutely nothing goes to waste in a circular supply chain. The circular supply chain eliminates the waste through making traditional outputs of the offal, the scrap, the excess material into inputs for another product or process. For example, gold, glass, copper, other metals from an old cell phone are collected and used in making new products. It also includes approaches like leasing products. And there's some examples now of even like jet engines where these are actually not sold to the airline, but they're leased to the airline. And when that end of life happens, the manufacturing company repossesses that, takes it apart, and makes new jet engines and uses it for spare parts and other things. So this leasing project helps that whole circle be complete. And that's what we're really looking for. How do we close the loop on that circle? So here's an example of that. You can see the manufacturer goes to the distribution center, the final destination. Then we've got some recycling and reuse, and we go back to the manufacturer. So we've got some materials coming in, a little bit of waste going out, but hopefully not much. And we're transforming that waste. And I'm going to take just a second here, and I'm going to show you about a 3-minute video that I think helps illustrate what circular supply chains are. So if you'll just bear with me.
The global value in green trade is rising in political and economic importance, topping $2 trillion a year. 2/3 of global consumers are willing to pay more for sustainable goods. Nevertheless, today's economic and social models can still exacerbate inequalities, encourage waste, and increase threats to our environment and health. That's partly because the small producers at the beginning of the sustainable supply chain get a mere sliver of the premium price paid for their goods. What if we could empower consumers to directly reward small-scale suppliers around the world that are committed to following sustainable practices? Imagine the impact if more people could fully participate in the growing value of the green economy. With a powerful combination of blockchain, digital identity, and payments technologies, we believe this is possible and imperative. Here's how it works. Using an app on their phone, a producer, in this case a coffee farmer, creates a profile. At his cooperative, his biometrics and photo for facial recognition are securely captured and verified. Several steps are taken to create his unique identifier using multiple security protocols. This identifier is then recorded on the blockchain, which acts as an index with links to all applicable data, including things like his payment details, so he can receive tips, or his farm's inspection history and organic certifications. This makes it easy to locate, access, and share information without the farmer's personal data being stored on the blockchain. The farmer is always in control of their data, determining which information is part of their public profile or what details will be linked to a particular product as it moves through the supply chain. He can also use the app as a management tool to keep track of product registrations, check his tip balance, renew certifications, and prepare a harvest for shipment. When a shipment is ready and registered, a barcode is automatically generated, embedding information about the coffee, the farmer, and his farm, like its organic certification. These details and each step the shipment takes along the journey are traceable as it moves across the supply chain, from farmers to processors to grocery store shelves, and finally to end consumers, where a simple scan not only tells the story of their sustainably sourced coffee and the farmers that grew it, but empowers them to say thank you via a secure tip. The benefit is a circular supply chain that goes beyond where it started and creates a closer connection between consumers and small growers. The hope is, by aligning incentives, we can empower an inclusive economy that encourages the actions to continue to mitigate environmental impact. Accenture has developed this capability, but it's just a start. We invite you to join us as we collaborate to build a more sustainable and inclusive world.
So I hope that gave you a good idea of what can be done and what's being done in a lot of areas. This is an agriculture example, but it's still a good example of what's going on with the technology. And the technology is one of the big drivers for that. So we have a lot of different things that we can do with circular supply chains. And why they matter is several reasons. They matter because we have increasing regulations and laws that constrain how we can dispose of materials. So it used to be that you just took a lot of down things to the landfill area. That's not possible so much anymore. It's not even legal in many areas. So, and those constraints are becoming more and more. There's a lot of constraints around what we need to do with computers and electronics and things like that. And I'm going to show you some of the magnitude of what we generate here in the US in just a couple minutes. So it gives broken, damaged products a new life so that you don't have to have that broken phone or that old phone sitting in your desk anymore. It helps customers who are looking for environmentally friendly supply chains. If we have less waste in our processes, it means more dollars stuck to the bottom line, which is good for every company. And more than the method just to reduce the environmental impact, reusing the parts and the material really maximizes the benefit that we get from the raw materials that our companies purchase. If we discard the waste, the investment into our material, the labor, and the energy and the overhead, that just means we discard some of that as well, because it's very rare that we just discard material. Anytime we discard material inside the manufacturing process, we're adding labor, energy, overhead into that as well. And so the waste that the cost of that waste really add up. And we're being able to make products from throwaway material. And those products have a lower cost than making them from brand new. And I'll give you some examples that companies are doing today. So let's start with some statistics. I'm not really an academic, but I always want to know the numbers and I want to know the baseline. I want to know where I'm starting from. So I did some research and found studies that are done annually by the EPA. I thought these were interesting and a little bit illuminating, even though it's a couple years old. The data is from 2017 because that's the most recent data that I could find. I think they're worth spending a couple minutes on so we have an appreciation of the magnitude of what companies and what the United States is dealing with in terms of waste today. So this data again is from 2017. They have a term municipal solid waste. That was 267.8 million tons in 2017. That includes bottles, boxes, food, the grass clippings and yard waste that you put in your bins or you put into the trash. It also includes sofas, some mattresses, computers, tires, refrigerators, all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't include construction and demolition debris, and it doesn't include non-hazardous industrial waste. So all of those things are not in there, which is a lot more of things that we deal with as a society, as a country. So this amounts to 4.5 pounds per person per day of this municipal solid waste. So that seems like a lot. And sometimes when I stopped to think about that, I thought, do I generate 4.5 pounds a day? And I said, no, I probably don't. But over time, you probably do. And there are other people and there are companies who contribute more than that to what they're making because their employee base is small. And we all take some of that when we do it on a per capita basis. So of that 267.8 million, 67 million were recycled, 27 were composted, 35%, therefore, if you add the 67 and the 27, that means only a third of that waste was recycled or composted. So I think I do pretty good on the recycling, but when you look at this as a statistic and you say, oh my gosh, of this, only a third of this, a little over a third was either recycled or composted in 2017. So 34 million tons were able to be combusted with energy recovery, where they burn some things and they do that. And then 139 million, over 50%, 52% went to landfills. So we still have a big opportunity here in the waste that we're generating. Just to give you um, a little more detail around that, paper and paperboard made up 87 million tons. Now, I was surprised at that because that's usually one of the things that people recycle in large numbers. But that was down a little bit from 2005, where it ranged from 28 to 33%, but it was still 25% of the total. Food amounted to 15%, 40 million tons. A lot of the food can't be composted, it can't be recycled, but it will be used in the landfills, but that's still a lot. And you think about that much food being wasted every year, 40 million tons, 15% of this waste was food. Plastics was still a very high number, 13.2%, 35 million tons. The plastics increased about 4 million tons from 2010 to 2017 from the durable goods, containers, and packaging that we use. In 1990, just for reference, I know that seems like ages ago, it was 30 years ago, plastics was only 8.2%. Now it's up to 13%. And it's increased slightly in percentage since 2012, probably because of all the water bottles that we drink and a lot of the containers that we use. Yard trimmings is a big number for that. 35 million tons in 1990, 16.8%. I find it interesting, it's still 35 million tons, but now compared to 1990, it's 13%. In 1990, it was 16.8%. So but the relative tonnage is the same, so 35 million. Metals, this is an area too that a lot of this is recyclable, but metals made up 25 million tons, about 9.4%. And then in 2017, consumer electronics represented less than 2% of the MSW. And this included consumer TVs, VCRs, phones, computer equipment, camera, stereos, all that kind of thing. I was surprised that that was so little. I thought that would be a larger number. And keep in mind that this is just the United States, but many countries are behind us in the percentages of things that we're recycling and whatever. So here's one more chart that I'm going to share with you. Here's the category, the number of million tons generated and the percentages there, what's recycled or composted, and then what goes into the landfill. Now, this again doesn't show that the percentage that's combusted with energy recovery by material, and that was 34 million tons total. So out of that 267, there's a lot of ways to do that. And the other category includes textiles, rubber and leather, and other things like that. So you can see that's a smaller percentage. But so 67 million tons of paper and paperboard, 44 million tons were recycled, and still 18.3 went to the landfill. So that's shocking to me that we're still sending 18 million tons of paper and paperboard to the landfill in 2017. Food, not so surprising because a lot of that would have to go into the landfill. You can only compost so much of that. If you've done composting in your yard, your own backyard, you can't put a lot of things into that. But so that one kind of makes sense. Plastics, again, um, out of 35 million tons generated, 2.9 got recycled or composted. 26.8 still went into the landfill. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Yard trimmings, a good percentage of that was composted, which I was pleased to see. Not too much went into the landfill, and putting yard trimmings and things into the landfill isn't the worst thing to do because over time that breaks down. Metals, only about a third of that was actually recycled. So a lot of metals still going into landfills. And then you can look at wood, glass, other things. There's a lot of things there to chew on and say, what can we do and how can we do this better? So a lot of opportunity. So when we're looking at circular supply chains, there are some barriers. And one of the barriers, of course, is sorting and recapturing that to figure out how to reuse it and recycle it. It's not often a real in-house capability that we have to do that. And not a lot of companies want to take that on to become really good at sorting and recapturing. So that's where companies like 3PLs are coming in, and they're able to do that. So if you work with a 3PL, you can ask them what their processes are for that, and you can also explore what companies are available to help you start looking at things like that. The other thing that circular supply chains are doing is they're selling new versus as good as new. So this is similar to what I was saying about you're taking parts, and when you're taking things apart like a phone apart, and you're using those parts in new products. So you have to be careful about that because it's difficult to sell something. It's illegal to sell something as new if it's not new. Probably you've all seen refurbs of phones and TVs and all kinds of things that you can get, even refrigerators and things like that. You can get refurbs that are supposed to be as good as new. Some people swear by those and buy those primarily. They look for those. You look for those in the stores, online, from the manufacturer direct, or and other people say, no, I bought one of those and it didn't work, and then whatever. But often they have the same warranty and guarantee as new products. And then there are what we call corporate barriers. There's barriers to cross-functional collaboration. It's easier sometimes to ask one department or one function to take the lead on a project because that's easier to implement within a large corporation. So when you have to work cross-functionally, you've got to have a lot of collaboration, and you've got to have collaboration with your suppliers. So to make circular supply chains work, they're very collaborative. They take a lot of open communication, and they take leadership and prioritization from the top managers down. It also requires that you look at new metrics. A lot of companies look at earnings before income tax and EBIT and EBITDA. So you're going to have to add new metrics in. You're going to have to look at like take back quantities or percentages. You're going to have to look at the percent of reuse and refurbish. You're going to have to look at your productivity from the resources you have and how that's affected by circular supply chains. So it's going to take some thought and some action to actually make that work. And a lot of companies don't have the ability to leverage all the technology. In the Accenture video I showed you, they talk about Accenture helping to create some of that. And we're going to talk about some of these other technologies too that you might be hearing buzzwords about, but you may not have those firmly integrated into your organization. So some of those enablers to circular supply chains are in the area of digital technologies. So there's 3D printing, the Internet of Things, machine learning, all kinds of analytics, blockchain technologies. So some people are very familiar with those, and some people say, oh, we're not there yet. So that's fine, but those are things that are enabling people to move to circular supply chains. Another big driver for circular supply chains are those government regulations that are really limiting what products and how much can go to waste, can go to a landfill, can go to whatever, and how much of that has to be reclaimed and how it has to be reclaimed. So that's driving companies to look at what they need to do to create more circular supply chains. And there's processes for that. So that product sale relationship, end of life disposal, there's more and more techniques that are being created, and the government is pushing those. If you bought a mattress lately, when you buy a mattress, you pay a fee for a disposal. When you buy a computer, you have to agree to take it to the right place to be disposed of, to be taken apart and whatever. You can't just buy the computer and say, oh, yeah, I'll throw it in the trash or whatever. And you can't put it in your recycle bin either. So there's a lot of processes that have been developed that enable people to do this better. Biometrics are another one. We saw the example about the food and the coffee, which is, I think, a very relatable way to look at that supply chain. But all of these take collaboration and communication. Luckily, I think companies are more open to that today, the collaboration and communication, just because they're realizing that they are not autonomous and they need to be working with suppliers, with customers, and with sub-tier suppliers in some cases, and in between retailers and distributors to really come up with the right solutions. If you think about another enabler to this, if you think about Netflix or another streaming service, when Netflix first started, they put DVDs in the mail to you and you got those in a day or two. But as explained by Deloitte University Press, a circular supply chain is more like a spider web than just a linear line. So these supply chains now um, have to have lots and lots of networks, and they have to go in between different areas. So more than just a line or a linear supply chain, they're more like webs with all of these interconnectedness. When Netflix now doesn't do DVDs anymore, I think they only do streaming. So now they've taken out the DVD element. They still have the satisfaction that you get from watching that TV show or that movie, but they stream it. You can download it, you can actually purchase it and put it in your own library, or you can, what happens to be in essence renting that, and you can watch it once and then return it without having to deal with the DVD, with the packaging, with the mail, with all of those things. So there's a lot of different ways now that we're seeing circular supply chains morph from what we're doing in a lot of different areas. Some of the benefits of circular supply chains, some of these are pretty eye-popping. The overall cost of producing products is reduced. In almost every case, companies reported reduction of total production cost. The other thing that was mentioned in the video, and I've seen this statistic several different times while I was researching this presentation, 2/3, 66% of consumers say they're willing to pay more for sustainable goods. So when companies say, well, this might cost a little bit at first, or I might have to make an investment in some technology or some equipment, 66%, 2/3 of the global consumers are willing to pay more. And for those of you living with and around millennials, which is all of us today, millennials say 73% of them are willing to pay more for sustainable goods because they recognize the impact to the planet. So recycling, reusing really helps manage price volatility as well. If you think about a very simple example, I worked a lot with plastic parts. And if you have plastic parts and you make them out of molds, you get your part and you usually get some offall in the form of a runner. And you can take those runners and you can regrind those, and you have a set percentage that you can use of regrind material with this with virgin material. So you're using that material again, and that's reducing the cost of your new material because you don't have to use all new material. You use some of what you've already paid for. You just have to grind it up and then combine it back. So when consumers are willing to do that, and we know that the virgin material costs a lot more, so when we can incorporate reused and recycled material, not only in plastics, but in other forms of material into production, companies better manage it and reduce their total cost and their total expenditures. The regulations around recycling, waste disposal, again, those are getting more stronger, more stringent. The EU now is requiring all EU countries to recycle 50% of their packaging. And in California, where I am, we have some moratoriums on plastic bags. We have guidance of 25% of the containers to need to be recycled. So there's a lot of push from the government regulations that say this is how we're going to handle that. Circular supply chains create brand differentiation in companies. So companies you're starting to see now advertise and talk about their sustainability practices, their environmental practices that work as part of their values, but also part of their processes and procedures. And this really empowers consumers to choose the brand that they want. And it lets suppliers who help them do that get some rewards from that as well. As you saw from the Accenture video, you can see who's participating. So even these very small suppliers can get notoriety from these applications where consumers are able to track and see who is contributing to all of this. So let's spend a couple minutes and talk about what you can do to put a circular supply chain in your organization. This is a big undertaking, and to go from where you are to zero waste is not going to be probably possible, practical, or very quick. But what we want to do is to look at what we can start to do to move in that direction. So the first step is really think differently. It's really driving your whole business model to that circular business model as well as the circular supply chain to get the most value out of the supply chain. It's also redesigning for sustainability. That's not only redesigning a product, but it's redesigning your processes. It's redesigning your policies. It's redesigning your approach and your strategies to include some sustainability. So whether or not you want to talk about climate control and climate change and things like that, what we do know, and you can argue whether that's a real thing or not, but what we do know is that we have a finite set of resources on this planet. And the more that we can conserve those and reuse those and shrink that carbon footprint, the better it is for future generations so that they won't be running out of things because we didn't manage what we have. So we want to do that, whether or not you believe in some of the other aspects, which is why I always focus in on that. But all of these activities really need top-down support, and they need to come from the very senior executives, and they need to help foster these projects, sponsor these projects, provide some resources for these projects, because this is a big one, but this has so much potential. The opportunities here are huge. And then you actually have to regenerate the materials. You have to figure out how you can do that. So when you shift your thinking, you really can change your thoughts and change the whole environment, change the world. So you want to look beyond recycling. You want to have the mindset that says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure out how to do this. You want to prioritize what you're doing. And again, recycling is great, but recycling is the first step. And it's really, they consider recycling in circular supply chains, it's considered the low hanging fruit. So that means that's a great place to start. Doesn't mean that you should stop there, though. You want to think about how you can reduce, how you can reuse, and what needs to be redesigned to incorporate that. And one way to do that is to actually map the current resource consumption. So, and the waste that goes with that. Find out what resources you're using, where those come from. This is also a good thing to do in terms of looking at the positioning your supply chain and the architecture of your supply chain when a lot of companies are rethinking how much comes from Asia, how much comes from different parts of the world, what you want to have come domestically. So mapping that is a good way to do that. By material type to show what goes into what. And you have to go down 2 or 3 different levels of suppliers, but it really gives you a good understanding of how that those materials are all coming together for your company to produce the goods and services you produce. And then you want to look at what you can do, what I call the right approach. The companies report really good things about products that they return for reuse that they can use and create new products out of, refurbished products. But what we find is 75% of these companies destroy 50% or more of the recaptured products. So an average of 45 to 75% of that product that's returned still gets to the waste area. So how do you do better with that? 92% of companies say they're gearing up for product life extension. They want to extend the life of their products so that there's not so much turnover and so much more going into landfills year over year. But only 30 to 40% of these companies are actually executing that and adding real meaningful life extensions to their products. This is not talking about adding another 3 months. It's talking about adding a year, 2 years, another 3 years to a product to be able to use that. So even though 92% of companies say they're working on it, only about a third of those are executing. And Apple is a good example in this case. Apple found that competitors were refurbing their phone products and selling those. And so Apple, instead of trying to fight that, they said, you know what? Instead of letting other people do it, we're going to do it. They jumped in to do it themselves, and they sell these refurbished products at reduced prices, primarily to Asian markets, but to some other markets. And as the world opens up even more, they're going to be able and positioned to do that. So instead of trying to fight someone that was doing that, they said, if they can do it, we can do it, and we're going to do it better because these are our products. So they've jumped in there. Redesigning for sustainability really means getting, again, it's not just redesigning a product. It's really setting some challenging goals for yourself and redesigning the way you do business. It's companies are setting goals for zero waste by 20 whatever, 2040, 2050. You're seeing some that are more aggressive than that. Some targets are like zero landfill targets. Caterpillar, for example, has a zero landfill goal, and they process 134 million pounds of material annually. So their goal is a zero landfill goal. So whatever makes sense to your company, and you can set an incremental goal and then set a longer term goal, because it doesn't do you any good to say, okay, we're going to do this by 2040, and you don't say what we're going to do in the next 2 to 3 years, because to get to 2040, you're going to have to start now and you're going to have to make those milestones. And it's, again, it's changing not only the products, but the processes. In some cases, it's changing the whole supply chain function and the way that they do business versus just putting in some individual projects to do some improvements. So it's wholesale changes in many ways. You want to look at the opportunities that impact your operating model. So you need to understand what your cost drivers are. You need to understand what your processes are, how those are working, what's working well, what's not. One way to do it, as I said, is to extend your product life so that a consumer can keep that product in use longer and be happy with that product. So if you think about phones, we've been in a kind of a throwaway phone mode where you were changing phones some people every year, some people every 2 years, and some people reluctantly every 3 years. But if you have a phone that's 5 years old, people probably start to laugh at you because it is so old. So thinking about how you can make that to be a longer lasting product is one way to do that. And whether that's televisions, phones, computers, whatever, extending that life actually does reduce a significant amount of waste. You're reusing more parts and materials in there. That includes things like standardization so that it can be used on a number of your products in a product line or across product lines. It also includes looking at end of life when you're designing that product up front. So usually you're just trying to get the functionality right and trying to get it in the marketplace. But it says, no, think about the end of life. How do I take this apart? How do I recycle it? How do I reuse it? How do I reclaim the parts in there the most efficient way so that my waste is decreased considerably? Again, getting the parts back is only part of the battle, but if you're only using 40% or less of what comes back, you're not meeting the goal. So you really need to push for how to do more of that. And then, like I say, the lease versus sell products. Well, if you can do that with a jet engine, you can do that with a lot of other products. The consumer actually leases instead of purchasing, so that ultimately, when the consumer is finished with it, it goes back to the manufacturer and they have a plan for what to do with that. So you lease it, you get the use of it, you get the ownership and um, the ability to do what you need to do with that, the use of that, but then ultimately you don't have to be responsible for the disposal, which takes a lot of burden off us as consumers, but it also helps that company get certainty that they're going to get those products back and be able to use them. But that takes a good strategy for what you do with that. It takes top-down collaboration. You have to be building this network of partners inside and outside the company. You have to have the metrics to measure this, and you've got to build capacity and capability so that you can manage this cooperatively across the supply chain, throughout the supply chain. And again, your supply chain becomes more of a web than a linear line, a chain link. So you want to involve your customers and suppliers because they want to contribute to saving the planet. This is going to expand your marketing. These lease programs, all of these things really need top-down push and top-down leadership and guidance. And then finally, the fourth step is to regenerate materials. And I use the picture of a starfish because, as we know, starfish can regenerate their limbs. If something happens and they lose one of their arms, that actually can grow back. And this one has, you can see they're all five are regenerating. So you want to make sure you have collection points in process and end of life for these materials. You want to connect your generators of the material with the users and the disposers of this so that you link all of them up and they all are working in tandem. There's all of these digital technologies that will help you track and trace the materials throughout the product life cycle, and things like the Internet of Things, RFID, all of the analytics that we have to use with these. We can monitor the utilization and we can actually look at and project service and replacement cycles along with extending the life. And then we know how much material is coming back when, and that really helps to do this whole planning thing in a way different area and way that we've done it before. This really turns reverse logistics kind of on its head, because what we're doing is turning outputs into inputs and continuing that cycle. So we're closing that loop, and that's the important thing to do. So a couple good success stories. Nike has a reuse a shoe program. You can recycle old shoes at the Nike stores. They take these shoes, they grind them up, and they use this material in new shoe manufacture. So it's similar to the plastic runner example I gave you, but they're doing this with shoes. That reduces the landfill volume quite a bit. It saves Nike a ton of money, and it enhances their brand. So if you're hard on shoes, like a lot of people are, or if you're a very strong athlete and you go through tennis shoes or running shoes or whatever pretty frequently, then this is a good way to do that. And Nike's not the only one doing that. Adidas has Parley for the Oceans. They've pledged to make 11 million shoes out of plastic that they have obtained from the ocean and recycled. So they've created a line of shoes for this. And it's more than shoes as well. There's also clothing and things that come from this recycled plastic that they're cleaning out of the ocean. This line is doing really well, and they're on track to make $1 billion with this line of products that are from this reclaimed plastic. Renault and Caterpillar both are doing this same as new parts. Renault actually started doing this after the World War II back in the 40s and 50s. They do the same as new parts. They sell them at discounts with guarantees and warranties that are equivalent to new parts, but they clean them up, they make sure that they work, and then they sell those again for spares, repairs, and they can use those in new products as long as they declare that and don't sell that as completely new. It takes a new design approach for disassembly, but it can really reduce the cost of the new, and they're finding really good results from that. Dell is taking parts from their own products, they're taking plastic parts, they're recovering those, and they're again doing the regrind thing and using the plastic again. And they have reported significant cost savings from just the plastic parts. And we know that computers have a lot of other parts that they can do similar things with. So those are just four really good examples. So, what I know for sure is there's a better way to manage supply chains, and a circular model is a really good way to reduce the cost, promote sustainability, and keep resources in use as long as possible. So, these are, again, the wave of the future. They're part of the future. You need to have some creativity. You need to be able to look at the bigger picture and put strategies in place that are going to help you achieve that. Again, you have to see the supply chain not as a chain like we have seen it for decades, but as a complex network and a web. We want to use more techniques because it's more widespread and it's going to be more impactful than just a typical lean approach. A lean approach is a good thing to do, but you can do more and you can use that as a first step to get into bigger and better things. We all know that we're facing consequences from growing carbon footprints. And when I look at those numbers again and see how much we're still putting in the landfill, it says, okay, there's an opportunity here. This is really high on executives' goals. Again, 2020 derailed some of that and postponed some of that, but it's coming. 90% of the big companies are looking at how they can do this. And we know that more and more compliance and regulations are coming our way to manage all the materials that we use. Consumers are aware of this, and consumers are willing to pay more for things that they feel fit their desires as that. And if we look at waste not as something that we don't want to deal with, but if we look at it as an opportunity, we can really change the way that we do business. So what's next? How can you integrate this? So you can start with your 2021 goals and objectives. You can start with recycling, but always think bigger. Try to think out of the box. You can prioritize your opportunities. So look at your supply chains, look at your organization, your products, look at your consumers, look at your suppliers. Where are your opportunities? Develop your strategies, deploy those, and make sure you track those and use new and different metrics that are really going to show you how you're doing in using a circular approach. So if you think about your company and your system, who's in your corner to assist with implementing some or all of these techniques? If you could use some outside support, I invite you to consider working with me. If you're impatient to get started on this, or you want to make sure that you've got a plan in place for 2021, you can schedule a call and talk to me. You can go to callwithjane.com and we can talk about how we can work together, how I could help your company move in directions for this or for any other supply chain improvements. I have a program called an advisor program that lets you have access to me, my expertise, and some of my colleagues as well. And it's a good program that might fit your needs for the end of this year and into 2021. So during this call, we'll talk about your situation. I'll walk you through my program, and we take some time to find out if it's a good fit, because it's got to be built on trust and it takes commitment from both sides. So it's simple to get this free call. You just go to callwithjane.com, pick your time zone, select a meeting time, and you're going to be all set. So if you book a call, if you think this sounds like a good idea, then that's great. But I know from doing these kinds of webinars, I say, oh, I'll get back to that. So I'm going to give you some incentive to do it right now. If you book a call with me by the end of today, you're going to get two gifts. You're going to get the slides from this presentation, and you're going to get a 1/4 subscription to my dynamic dialogue webinars. These are bi-weekly webinars that cover a wide variety of supply chain topics. They're great for dealing with the pandemic. They're great for looking into 2021 and beyond. So all you need to do is schedule Call with Jane. So book now and you'll get these things. So now it's time for prizes. If you didn't already, you can send me an email with webinar as the subject. Send it to Jane at purplelink.co. And I think somebody put that in the chat room. And if you do that right now for today's raffle, you're going to get the slides. And the only way, if you're interested in the slides, I saw somebody else ask about that. The only way to get the slides is to give me your email so I have somewhere to send them. So I will send the slides to everyone who participates in the raffle. So you can do that. You're going to get a great book called Dare to Lead. It's a top seller on the New York Times bestseller look. She talks a lot about what it takes to lead in today's environment. And as we all know, leadership now is required more than ever. So even if you don't think you are a leader, this book will show you that you can lead, and how you can do that, and what to look for in other people in your organization. So I'll give you just another minute to do the jane@purplelink.co with the subject line webinar, very simple email. And then I'm going to use my random number generator to pick a winner. The other thing you'll get the slides, the book, and the subscription to my webinars. And again, the slides will go to everybody who participates in this. So I'm going to give you 30 more seconds. And I'm also going to let you know that you can go to my website and you can look for more webinars, more workshops. You can see some of the topics for the webinars and all the plans that we have for 2021 and beyond. So 15 more seconds, and then I'm going to use my random number generator and pick a winner. Okay, so here we go. And the winner is going to be Flora Matesic. I'm sorry, are you here? Can you come in on the chat or open your mic and say that you're here? Flora? If she's not there, then I'm going to pick somebody else.
No, she's there. She's
okay.
Yeah, she just can't talk right now.
Okay.
But she's definitely there.
Okay, then Flora, I'm going to ask you to send me another email with your address so I can send you the book to that address. And I have one more slide, and that slide is what I'm going to leave you with today, that this old English proverb tells us that one man's trash is another man's treasure. And that's what we want to think about when we think about circular supply chains. So I'll take questions, comments. We have a couple minutes left.
If anybody has any questions, just please put it in the Q&A or the chat. I know this is a new topic for everybody, but that's why we wanted to bring it to you. At this time, I would like to thank you, Jane, for such an informative presentation. I learned so much on this one, and there was so much valuable information in this. And I hope everybody was able to take away at least a few nuggets from today's program.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that. It was my pleasure. And I always enjoy meeting with you, Kathy, and your ISM organization, and all, like I say, all the outreach you have to other organizations. It's always a great group.
Thank you so much. I did want to just mention to everybody that's still on the webinar that next week we will be doing two programs next week. November 11th, we will have a panel discussion on the real estate landscape post-COVID-19. And then on November 12th, this was actually from another organization, but we are publicizing it for them. They're doing a special program on hiring our veterans in 2020, which I think would actually be a very important program to attend if you're able to. Details are on our website, and I will be sending out a brief survey along with continuing educational credit for all of our attendees. I don't see, let's see, I see something in the chat bar right here. Oh, that was just from Flora. We are actually fine. Thank you very much, everybody. Jane, did you have any last comments before we end the webinar?
No, thanks again. If you have questions, you have my email. You can reach out to me, and I'll send out the slides later this afternoon.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for attending. You will get a brief survey. If you have any interesting topics that you would like us to produce for next year, please put them in the survey so that we can then explore those and look for speakers for those particular topics for 2021. Again, we thank everybody who has joined us this past year for all of our programs, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully next week and for our programs next year as well. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.